Hi, this is Julie with Beadaholique, and in this video I'm going to teach you how to make the Loom Bracelet Duo Kit, which is an exclusive kit by Beadaholique. In every kit you're going to get all the supplies you need to make 2 complete bracelets. So you can see that we have a couple different colorways and actually a couple different patterns too. So this one is our Melville Blue kit, Joyce Green, Austen Berry, Hemingway Teal, and Bronte Rose. And let me show you an instruction sheet. So here you see the Hemingway Teal, and you're going to get both patterns as well as full written instructions. Now, in terms of what you get in a kit, you're going to get everything you see here. So you've got your 2 clasps, you've got your 3 tubes of beads, which will be enough beads to do both bracelets, some E6000 glue, as well as a spool of some thread. You're going to get the patterns and written instructions. So all you're going to need to supply are a pair of scissors, Post-it notes, some toothpicks or scrap pieces of wire, and some painter's tape or even masking tape would work fine. And if you already have a loom and you already have your glue, we have something called a refill kit where you'll just get these items here. So that is something to keep in mind. Now the one I want to do is the Melville Blue one. So let me just show you what this would look like on. You can wear them together or you can wear them separately. Maybe keep one, give one as a gift, whatever you want to do. And in terms of size, each one will vary according to where you want to do the clasp, because it's an adjustable clasp, between 6 and 8 inches. So you have a wide range in there. So the beadwork itself and the clasp is going to be 6 inches, and you have that 2-inch extender chain already on there. So let me show you how to go about making these. They're really, really fun. So I'm going to go ahead and scoot some of this out of my way. I'm not going to need these pieces for a little bit. So you're getting the jewel loom. This is a great little compact loom. And we're going to pull it out. And let me show you how to put it together. If you are already familiar with this part, just fast forward through this section of the video. All right. So in your jewel loom kit, you're going to get instructions, which are great. This is going to show you exactly how to do your looming. You're going to get a little threader. I don't really use that, but it's there if you need it. And you're going to get a loom needle. If you take this out, we're not going to need that carrying case right now, and we're not going to need the instruction booklet either. Let me show you how to go ahead and assemble this. So this is flexible. And we're going to go ahead and put one end of the rod right in that one hole. And then we're going to bend up the loom and stick the other part of the rod in, and now it bows, which is great. Now we're going to need our needle as well. Okay, and our thread. So if you look at these patterns that are going to come with it, you can go ahead and you can count the rows. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So it's 11 columns or whatever you want to call them wide, which means you're going to need 12 warp threads. And the warp threads are the threads that go this direction because you're going to need a thread on each side. So we're going to go ahead and thread our loom. To do that, go ahead and tie a knot. And as you're pulling that loop closed, slip it over the back peg. And then tie another knot. You can even do a double knot. And I like to do one more just to be sure it's secure. And then you don't need a very long tail here. And I do apologize, I know this white thread is a little bit hard to see against this white cloth, but once we start looming, it's going to be fine. So what I like to do is I like to count 12 notches over, and on the 13th notch, lay my thread. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And on that 13th notch, just go ahead and lay your thread into the groove and stretch it across to the other side and find the corresponding 13th notch. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and the next one is 13. flip your loom over and go around that back peg and come back up and go into the notch next to it. And so we're just putting our warp threads in place. And you're just going to keep doing that. You're going to go behind those back notches and back up to the top side. And you're going to do this until you have 12 warp threads in place. So I like how lightweight this loom is, and it's also really easy to just hold up like this. Like you see, I'm just really very easily able to work with it, to turn it upside down, right side up. It's not at all cumbersome. So what I'm going to do in this video here is I'm going to show you how to make the wider of the two bracelets. That's what I'm kind of getting at here. And then it'll be the exact same technique for the more narrow bracelet. Let me see how many I have here and then I'll keep talking. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So I need one more. So I will then give you some instruction on how to make the narrow one, but it'll be the exact same technique. But I will show you how to properly tie off the narrow one as well as the wide one and add the clasp, because it's just a wee bit different. It's the same technique, but it's just a different number. So I would like to show you that. So now that we've got all 12 of our threads, we're going to loop it around here and we are going to cut it off and tie a knot. If you want to use a pair of tweezers or a chain nose plier to help you grab that thread, that works too. Okay, I'm just going to tie another knot. And another one for good measure. Let's make this one a double knot. Okay, and you can trim this little tail too. All right, so one thing I would always recommend that I actually did not just do because I was talking is always make sure you double count your rows just to make sure that you actually have 12. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I do, because you just wouldn't want to end up with 11 and have to redo the whole thing. So let me tell you right now how many you will need for the narrower bracelet. So you see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it is 7 columns wide. So you'll need 8 of these warp threads when you go to do the narrow pattern. Now we're going to go ahead and spread out our beads. And 3 tubes are plenty for these 2 bracelets. So in this particular pattern, we have a pretty navy blue. You can see these are all Toho beads, so they're really nice and uniform. Now you're going to go ahead and start with some thread. So you will want to add more thread as you go at some point. Otherwise, it's just going to be too long of a length. I think it would probably be around 12 feet or so if you wanted to do the whole bracelet in one length of thread. So I'm going to go ahead and start with let's start with about 6 feet. That's a comfortable length for me. And I'm just estimating because I know I can easily add more thread at any time. So go ahead and thread it onto your loom needle, and you'll notice a loom needle is a lot longer than a traditional beading needle. And you're going to see why that is in just a minute. Okay, we are ready for our first row. So if you note the pattern, this is where you're going to start, because if you're right-handed, you're going to be going from this way over to here. So from the right to the left. So on your pattern, the start bead of row 1 is on the right. So to me, when I first started doing this, I was a little bit counterintuitive, but it makes it a lot easier if you're right-handed, and just reverse it if you're left-handed. So here we're going to look at our pattern. We need a gold bead, a blue bead, 3 white beads. So let's go ahead and do that. A gold bead, a blue bead, and 3 white beads. And then we need 3 gold beads, followed by 2 whites, a blue, and a gold. Followed by 2 whites, a gold, and a blue. All right, so that should be 11 beads on there, and you can just double check. And you're going to start a couple inches away from your end because eventually you're going to need a good length of these threads that are hanging out to be able to tie your knots. So go ahead and line these up. So they're still on the needle. I'm starting to push them up from the underside, and my finger is really starting to guide them, and I want to fit 1 in each groove. And this can be a little tricky. And if need be, just make it work. Just go ahead and pull those threads. You see how I'm just pulling it like that? Because once you get the first row, the beads themselves are going to create nice even spaces. Okay, so I'm still pushing them up with my finger. And they kind of stick in there, but you really don't want to let go of it. Okay, and now I'm pushing them up with my finger. I'm going to pull the needle through. I'm not letting go. I'm going to pull my thread through. And remember, I did not tie a knot. And that's because we're going to weave in this tail at the end. So you want a tail of at least, I'd say 9 inches, 12 inches. And now we're going to go back through our beads on top. So as we came from underneath, and that's where our thread was, now we want to make sure our thread is on top. So you're really pushing those beads up. There we go. And now pull your thread. And in the beginning, if you're working with a lot of thread, it can get a little tangled coming through the beads, so just pull it nice and slow in case you do end up with any kinks. And we just completed our first row. So let me show you another row. So here, let's go back here. So it's gold, 2 blues, a white, gold, 2 blues, 2 whites, and a gold. So gold, 2 blues, 2 whites, and a gold. And now for the remaining half, you can see it's just like a mirrored reflection of the first half. So if you look at this pattern and you were to divide it down the middle, this side here is just a mirror of this side. So it's just the opposite. So I can look at my beadwork right here, and I know I just now need 2 whites, 2 blues, and a gold. So I don't even have to look back at my pattern. So 2 whites, 2 blues, and a gold. Again, we're going to slip it underneath, and a lot easier to get those beads into those grooves now. And so the thread paths you're creating going this way are called your weft threads. So these are the warp and these are the weft. And just pull it through. And now back up top, and just make sure you're really pushing those beads up with your finger so that this weft thread goes on top of your warp threads when you're going in this direction. And I see that I just made a mistake. If you look right here, I did make a boo-boo. Now in this case, it's my very first row, which is going to be covered with my clasp. So not a big deal in this case. If that was anywhere else on my pattern, I would simply just pull out my weft threads. I would take my needle off, pull out my weft threads, and just start over from that spot, which is very easy to do. But it is good to kind of be looking at your beadwork as you go. So mistakes do happen. And luckily in this case, it's not going to show up in the final result. Let's do row 3. So we need a gold, a blue, a gold, a blue. then we're going to need a white and a gold, and a white and a gold. And since, remember, we just talked about how the second half was a mirror of the first, I can look at the sequence and know that I'll just now need a white, a blue, a gold, a blue, a gold. So it's kind of nice to not have to look at your pattern again for that second half. Okay. Go ahead. Push them up and push them where they need to be. Keep your finger in place. Pull your thread through. Now go back up top. And there you go. Now if you do accidentally ever go under a warp thread, so let's say you're doing this. There's a little knot right there, that's why we're pulling nice and slow. Let me finish getting this real quick, and I'll tell you what to do if you ever drop a bead. Okay. All right. So let's say you're going along nicely. You've gone under, you're going up top, and then somewhere in the middle here, you accidentally go under one of these things, one of these warp threads when you should have gone on top. What might happen is your bead might fall out. Don't panic. All you're going to need to do is go back through your beads. So restring some thread onto your loom needle. Go back through your beads in the proper way so that it goes under and then over, and then tie off your thread, and that will add the bead. So you'll just pop a bead in there and just do the thread paths like you should. We actually have a full video showing you how to do that on Beadaholique, because I know that explanation might have been a little bit confusing, but it's good to know if you do a lot of loom work because it's bound to happen. All right, let me do one more row, and then I'm going to bead a bunch off camera until I get to about the midway point where I need to add more thread, and I want to show you how to add more thread. So one more row and then we'll do that. So we've got a gold followed by 2 blues followed by 2 whites and a gold, and then we're just going to mirror it. So 2 more whites, 2 more blues, and a gold. And you can see our pattern is starting to form. There we go. So just continue doing this until you run out of thread, which is what I'm going to do, and then I'll show you how to add more. All right, we've done about 50% and we're almost out of thread. We have about 12 inches left. So at this point, do not tie a knot and just slip your needle off of your thread and leave your thread hanging. Cut yourself another 6 feet or so of thread, and we're going to reattach the needle. And now I'll just count to see where I left off. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So right now I'm right here, which is a gold, a blue, a gold, a blue, a white, and a gold, and then I'll mirror it. So gold, blue, gold, blue, white, gold, and now just mirror it. Okay, and just start as if this is a brand new thread, just like you did at the very beginning. Everything is the same. Leave your tail so you have enough to thread a needle back onto it at the end, and go back through. And now just continue beading, and that's all there was to it to add more thread. And at the end, I'll show you how to tie off these threads. So continue beading the rest of your beadwork until you finish the pattern, and then I'll show you how to take it off the loom and tie your knots and attach your clasp. So we finished our beadwork, and I'm going to show you now how to tie off your ends. But real quick, I want to point out that this length here represents what you see in the pattern here. And with the clasp added and that little extender chain, this will be a 6 to 8 inch bracelet. Now, if you do want it to be longer, before you go any further, you would just add more beadwork. And you can see here pretty clearly that this is a repeating pattern. All of these chunks are the same. So even though your pattern doesn't necessarily go longer than this, all you have to do is look at what you've just done here previously and keep going. And that's going to be the same true for this pattern as well. Although this is panels, you can either add a whole extra panel or just a partial panel, and that's going to be fine. It is a nice repeating pattern. So now let me show you how to tie off your ends. And you should have 4 strings at this point, unless you added more thread an additional time. So this was a length of thread and this was a length of thread. So let's go ahead and tie off one of these middle ones. So I'm going to go ahead and put this back onto my loom needle. Oops, let me get that cut a little cleaner. And that's why you want to leave plenty of thread, just so you're not cutting yourself short. There's no reason to. Okay, so there we go. And so what we're going to do, you'll notice this bottom thread here and the top thread here. So for the bottom one, I want to go towards the top with my weaving it in. And this one here, I want to go down this way, just so it's a little bit more secure. We're really joining those two pieces of thread together. So I'm just going to go into the next row and go all the way through the beads with my needle. And that's where this one is coming out of. So I'm just going to hold it so I don't snag it. And just go all the way through and pull. And now I'm going to go up to the next row. Instead of going all the way through, I'm going to come up after a few beads and pull. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to catch under one of my weft threads. Remember, the weft go this way and the warp go this way. Just going to carefully catch my needle under a weft thread. Go through it and just tie a little knot, just very discreet. And now I'm going to go through a few more beads and come back out and pull. And what I just did is I pulled that little knot into a bead, so it's really nicely hidden. I'm going to go and do the same thing. Tie a little knot, pull, and do it again. And I like to do 3 knots personally, just to make sure it's really good and secure. And if you want, you can do a double knot, go through that loop twice, and just pull it down, tug, and go through. And then go through the next couple beads, so you pull that knot into them, and then trim your thread. And I personally like to trim my thread not along the outer edge, because I find I'll always have like a little end of that thread poking out, so I like to trim it between beads. Just like that. And that was all there was to it to do that. And so you're going to do the same thing for this middle one, and you're actually going to do the same technique for the end ones as well. So just string your needle back on, go ahead and go through a row and come up the next row and tie 3 little discrete knots just like you did right here. And then it'll be time to remove our piece of beadwork from our loom, tie some knots on the end, and attach our clasp. So I'll be showing you that next after I go ahead and I tie off all my ends. Now that all of our ends are tied in, it's time to go ahead and cut this guy off of the loom. So you're going to want to make sure you leave yourself a good 2-3 inches at least to tie your knots. So I'm just going to cut it here. And then I'm going to turn turn this over and cut it right here. And now we are done with our loom. So it's a little hard to see on this white, so I'm going to see if I can find a way of making this a little bit easier. There we go. Okay, so we're going to be tying our threads, and what we're going to be doing, and I brought in a couple extra needles here because I like to use them to essentially part my strands. We're going to be taking the end 2 threads and tying them in a knot, and the next 2 threads over and tying them in a knot, and then taking those 2 different sections and tying them together. So let me show you what I mean. Go ahead, take the end 2, just tie a knot, just a simple overhand knot, and then we're going to also go ahead and tie a surgeon's knot, which is just going through your loop twice and pulling it down. Now we're going to go to the next 2 over and repeat. So simple overhand knot and then a surgeon's knot. 1, 2, and pull down. And we want our knots to just rest up against the beads. And now we're going to, and this is when I like to kind of part these a little bit, and I'm working on a cloth. If you're working on a bead mat, this will work as well. So go ahead and grab the 2 strands from the first knot. Okay, so take them in one hand, grab the 2 strands from the second knot, and tie these guys together. Again, just a simple overhand knot to begin with, followed by a surgeon's knot. Okay, pull that down. And that section is done. And you might be looking at this and thinking, boy, that kind of makes a bit of a big knot. But if you look at your clasp, you have a really nice big well. Let me just go ahead and open this up for you right now. So you have a really nice big well that's going to completely hide your first row of beads as well as your knots. So that section is now done. So again, I'm going to grab a little needle right here, pull these guys to the side so they stay down, and then you're going to do the exact same thing. You're going to go ahead and take the next two strands over, tie them into a knot, do the same with the next 2 strands over and tie them into a knot and then tie it together. That will be another section that's complete, and then you'll have one last final section to do with your remaining 4 strands, because remember, you started with 12 warp threads. So it's going to be a section of 4, a section of 4, and a section of 4. And if you're making the narrower bracelet, this has 7 beads across, which means you'll have 8 warp threads. So it'll be essentially just this minus the last 4 here. So you're going to do that to all your threads on both sides and on both bracelets. And then I'm going to show you how to go ahead and add a little bit of glue to your knots and then eventually trim them and put them into the clasp. So I finished all my knotting, and you can see it's quite messy looking at this point. So I have a little tip for you. So I'm going to take some Post-it notes because we need to put some glue on those knots. And I'm going to line them up so there's one on each end. And then I'm going to take some painter's tape. You can use whatever tape you want, because you're going to be taping over a portion of the strands that you're just going to eventually cut off. So what you can do is take your strands and pull them away from your beadwork and put some tape over them, and now that holds them in place. And do the same thing on the other end. So just pull them back. This always reminds me of really messy hair at this point. So you're just making sure that you are exposing those knots without strands overlapping them. Now I need to use some glue, and you know what? I just used my Post-it note. So I would end up opening this anyway, so I can use this for some glue right now. So your kit is going to come with a tube of E6000 glue. It'll be sealed, the way to go ahead and puncture that seal is in the cap. So there's a little pointed dart or whatever you want to call it in the cap. Turn it upside down, push, and you will break through that seal and a little bit of glue will come out. And then go ahead and put your cap back on and use a toothpick or a scrap piece of wire, and we're just going to put a little bit of glue over each knot. Doesn't require a lot. And remember, if you're doing the narrower bracelet, you will only have 2 of these knots on each side because it's 8 warp threads long instead of 12. Okay, there we go. It's okay if it gets on the beads a little bit on that last row of beads. So you're going to let that dry for about 20 minutes, and then you'll come back and you'll attach your clasp, and then you'll be all done and ready to wear your bracelet. All right, final step. So we're going to go ahead and take our tape off, and we're going to trim our threads. So just trim them right down near the knots, but not cutting the knots. So that's what that looks like. You're going to do that on both ends. Okay. Now we're going to take a little bit more E6000 just in a sec after we separate out our clasp. And you'll notice it's got this little well in there. So we're going to take a little bit of the glue. And not much, because we don't want it to spill out. We just want a little bit to grip the beadwork. And just go ahead and put it into the well. And now you're going to slide, there's a little groove right here. You're going to go ahead and you're going to slide your beadwork into the clasp between the first and second rows of beadwork. Just jiggle it a little bit. Don't force it, it'll go in on its own. You see how those knots are just disappearing, which is really nice. Keep going. All right, now go ahead, take a little bit more glue. Just put it down just on the top of that. And what you can do is you can just use the table that you're working on and the pressure from the table to go ahead and bend that end over to secure your beadwork. Let me show you the other side real quick. Again, just a little bit of glue in there. If you remember back from the beginning of the video, we're getting up to that boo-boo bead that I did. And it's just gonna disappear in here and no one's gonna know that that was there. Okay. Okay, and again, the pressure with the table, just to bend that guy over. And he is sealed shut, and you have a finished bracelet that you're ready to wear. And again, you're gonna get everything you need in these kits to make both bracelets in whatever colorway you pick and pattern that you pick. So that is how you make a beaded loom bracelet, and these are the Beaded Loom Duo kits exclusively by Beadaholique.